Owen Barrett had $47 to his name when he saw the auction listing. Isolated cabin, Greystone Ridge, uninhabitable condition, rumored haunted, minimum bid 25 cents. Most people would have laughed and scrolled past. Owen saw opportunity, or perhaps desperation, dressed as hope. After 22 years keeping the North Point Lighthouse, budget cuts had automated his job into obsolescence. At 53, with no family and a pension that wouldn't cover rent anywhere civilized, a 25-cent cabin in the wilderness felt less like a gamble and more like fate, offering one last hand. The auction took place in a municipal building that smelled of mildew and broken dreams. Owen was the only bidder. The clerk seemed almost apologetic, processing the transaction, sliding a rusted key across the counter with a warning. 3 people died up there. Winter of 1847, summer of 1923, and a hiker just last year. Locals won't go near it after dark. Some say it's cursed, others say it's something worse. Owen pocketed the key. I've spent 2 decades in a lighthouse surrounded by fog and storms and the ghosts of drowned sailors. I'm not afraid of an old cabin. He should have been. The drive to Greystone Ridge took 6 hours through increasingly remote forest roads. His truck finally gave up half a mile from the property line, engine seizing with a death rattle that echoed through the pines. Owen grabbed his pack and walked the final stretch, boots crunching over frost-hardened leaves as November dusk bled the color from the world. The cabin materialized through the trees like something conjured from nightmare, walls sagging, roof partially collapsed, windows dark as cemetery soil. But the stone foundation held firm, and the chimney stood straight. Owen had rebuilt worse. He could make this work. He had to make this work. That's when he saw the wolf, not prowling, not hunting, just sitting 30 yards away, watching with eyes that caught the last light like amber lanterns. It was massive, easily 150 pounds, its coat silver grey fading to black along the spine. Owen froze. Wolves didn't behave this way, sitting, observing, waiting as if expecting him. The wolf stood, took 3 deliberate steps toward the cabin, then looked back at Owen. The message was unmistakable. "Follow me. There's something you need to see." Every rational instinct screamed at Owen to retreat, to abandon this cursed property and hitchhike back to civilization. But he'd spent his life reading the language of wild things. The ocean's moods, the wind's warnings, the patterns in bird migrations that predicted storms. And this wolf wasn't threatening. It was beckoning, guiding him toward whatever secret had been waiting in that 25-cent cabin for someone desperate or foolish enough to listen. Owen adjusted his pack and followed the wolf toward the door. Behind them, the forest held its breath. What do you think is waiting inside that cabin? And where are you watching this story unfold? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from our community around the world. Owen pushed open the cabin door, hinges shrieking protest. The wolf slipped inside ahead of him, moving with the confidence of something that had been here many times before. Inside, Owen's flashlight revealed chaos frozen in time, furniture overturned, dishes shattered, claw marks gouged deep into the wooden walls. But beneath the destruction lay evidence of something else. Deliberate construction, quality craftsmanship, details suggesting the original builder had invested both money and care into this remote dwelling. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, its mantel carved with symbols Owen didn't recognize. Not Native American, not European, something older or more obscure. The wolf sat before the hearth, tail sweeping dust as it waited for Owen to understand something. He approached slowly, examining the carvings more closely. They depicted a narrative, human figures standing beside wolf forms, not in conflict, but in partnership. Hunting scenes, building scenes, a ceremony of some kind, where hands and paws touched a central object that looked like a sphere or crystal. Owen found a metal box behind loose stones in the fireplace, its surface tarnished but intact. Inside, documents protected by oilcloth, remarkably preserved despite the cabin's decay. Land deeds dating to 1847 registered to Elias Barrett, Owen's surname, the connection hitting him like cold water. He'd never known his family history beyond his grandfather, had assumed Barrett was common enough to be coincidental. Now he was holding proof his ancestors had owned this land, this cabin, nearly 2 centuries ago. But the documents told a darker story. Elias Barrett had purchased 500 acres for purposes of sanctuary and guardianship, the deed specifying that the land must never be logged, mined, or developed in accordance with the covenant of Grey Watchers. Attached was a letter in elegant script. "To my descendants, this land is sacred ground, protected by pact older than our nation. The wolves are not our enemies, but our brothers in keeping. Should you inherit this burden, trust them absolutely. They see what we cannot. They remember what we forget." Owen read the letter 3 times, his mind struggling to reconcile words written in 1847 with the wolf currently watching him from across the room. Wolves lived maybe 15 years in the wild. This animal couldn't be connected to his ancestors' time. Yet something in its steady gaze suggested knowledge spanning far longer than any natural lifespan. He explored further, finding a trapdoor beneath a rotted rug. The wolf barked once, sharp, commanding, and positioned itself beside the opening as if saying, "This is why I brought you here." Owen pulled the door open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Cold air rushed up, carrying scents of earth and stone, and something metallic he couldn't identify. The wolf descended first, moving down the ladder with surprising agility for such a large animal. Owen followed, his flashlight beam bouncing off walls that transitioned from rough timber to smooth stone, suggesting this underground space was much older than the cabin above. They emerged into a chamber that stole Owen's breath. It was huge, 50 feet across, ceilings supported by natural stone columns, walls covered in the same symbols from the fireplace mantel. But the center of the space held something that made Owen question his sanity. A pool of water that glowed with soft blue-green luminescence, fed by an underground spring that bubbled up through cracks in the bedrock. And standing in the pool, partially submerged, was a structure, a cairn of stones arranged in a spiral pattern, each stone carved with dates and names. The wolf waded into the pool, the water parting around it without wetting its fur, and touched its nose to the cairn. The glow intensified, and Owen heard something impossible. Voices, dozens of them, speaking in harmony. They spoke his name. They welcomed him home. They told him the lighthouse had only been his training ground, preparing him for this, the true guardianship his bloodline had maintained for generations. The 25-cent cabin wasn't cursed. It was a test. And Owen had just passed the first trial. If this mystery has you hooked, we'd love to have you join us on this journey. Hit subscribe to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers and discover what happens next. The voices faded, leaving Owen trembling at the pool's edge, his understanding of reality fundamentally shattered. The wolf emerged from the water completely dry, shook once, and led him to a natural alcove where a wooden chest sat untouched by moisture or decay. Inside, Owen found journals, dozens of them, spanning from 1847 to entries dated just 5 years ago. Each bore a Barrett signature, each documented the same duty, guardianship of the source. The earliest entries, written by Elias Barrett himself, explained the covenant. In 1847, during westward expansion, Elias had been a surveyor working for the federal government, mapping territories for future settlement. Deep in the wilderness that would become Greystone Ridge, he discovered this spring, a source of water unlike any other, possessing properties that defied scientific explanation. Plants watered from it grew with supernatural vigor. Animals that drank from it lived twice their normal lifespans. And humans who spent time near its waters experienced heightened perception, accelerated healing, and in rare cases, communion with the consciousness of the land itself. Elias recognized immediately that such a resource would trigger a gold rush mentality if discovered. Nations would go to war over it. Corporations would drain it dry, attempting to bottle and sell immortality. So he did something radical. He bought the land under false pretenses, built the cabin as a decoy, suggesting normal habitation, and then conspired with the indigenous wolves, whose pack had guarded the spring for centuries before any human arrived, to create the legend of a haunted, cursed property that would keep people away. The deaths mentioned in the auction listing, Owen found those entries too. Winter 1847. A claim jumper who'd followed Elias, intent on stealing the land, had been driven mad by what he called wolf demons, and died of exposure fleeing through a blizzard. Summer 1923. A developer who'd purchased the property at tax auction, planning to drain the spring for a resort's water supply, had encountered the wolves and suffered a fatal heart attack. Last year's hiker, a pharmaceutical company scout using GPS to survey for rare botanical specimens, who'd stumbled upon the spring and been escorted away by the pack. The official death was ruled a climbing accident miles from the cabin, but the truth was, the man had run in terror and fallen. The wolves weren't killers. They were guardians, protecting the source through intimidation and, when necessary, by allowing trespassers' own fear to destroy them. And they chose human partners, always from the Barrett line, to maintain the property, pay the taxes, and provide a human face that discouraged official investigation. Owen read entry after entry, describing his ancestors' lives here, raising families, living simply, aging slowly thanks to the spring's influence, and forming deep partnerships with the wolf pack. Each Barrett developed unique bonds with particular wolves, relationships that transcended normal human-animal dynamics. The journals spoke of wolves who understood English, who warned of approaching dangers, who mourned their human partners when death finally came. The most recent journal belonged to Owen's uncle, a man he'd never met, who died 5 years ago without heirs, leaving the property to fall into tax delinquency until the county auctioned it. The final entry was a letter addressed to Owen specifically. "Nephew, if you're reading this, the Lighthouse has prepared you. You've learned patience, isolation, vigilance. Now come learn purpose. The Grey Watcher who brought you here is named Senna. She's 73 years old, impossible by normal standards, but the spring sustains us all. Trust her absolutely. She'll teach you what I cannot write." Owen looked at the wolf, at Senna, with new understanding. She wasn't just an animal. She was a sentinel, a teacher, a living bridge between human consciousness and something far older. And she'd been waiting 5 years for him to lose everything else, so he'd finally be desperate enough to buy a 25-cent cabin and follow a wolf into the darkness. "Okay, Senna," Owen whispered. "I'm listening. Teach me." The wolf's tail wagged once, slow and deliberate. Then she turned and moved deeper into the cave system, leading Owen toward chambers his ancestors had documented, but he had yet to see. Over the following weeks, Owen learned the spring's true nature, not through scientific analysis, but through direct experience. Senna would lead him to the pool at dawn and dusk, instructing him through body language and patient demonstration to simply sit, observe, and allow the spring's energy to teach him as it had taught countless guardians before. The first lesson was healing. Owen had arrived with decades of accumulated injuries, a lighthouse keeper's occupational hazards. Chronic back pain from climbing spiral stairs thousands of times, arthritis in his hands from constant machinery maintenance, a persistent cough from years of breathing salt air and diesel fumes. Within 3 days of drinking the spring water and sleeping in the chamber, those ailments began fading. Not instantly, not miraculously, but steadily, naturally, as if his body was remembering how to function at optimal capacity. By the second week, the changes became more profound. His senses sharpened dramatically. He could hear Senna's footsteps in the forest from a quarter-mile away, distinguish between the howls of different pack members by subtle tonal variations, smell approaching weather systems hours before visible clouds appeared. Colors intensified. The forest transformed from simple greens and browns into a symphony of thousands of distinct hues. His eyes had always been capable of seeing, but his brain had filtered out as unnecessary. The journals had warned about this phase. "The spring doesn't grant superpowers," one ancestor wrote. "It removes the dampeners modern life places on human perception. We evolved to sense far more than civilization allows. The spring simply reminds our bodies of their original design." But the most startling change was communication with Senna and her pack. Owen began understanding them not through words, but through emotional resonance and image transfer. When Senna wanted to show him where elk grazed, he'd receive a mental impression of the location, not a map, but a felt sense of direction, distance, and terrain. When younger wolves needed to communicate danger, Owen experienced their urgency as his own, his body responding before his conscious mind understood the threat. The spring water was the catalyst, but the wolves were the teachers. They'd evolved alongside this water source for millennia, developing a symbiotic relationship with its properties that made them far more than normal predators. They lived longer, thought deeper, and maintained cultural memory across generations in ways scientists would claim impossible. Owen discovered the pack had 7 members, ranging in age from 5 to 93 years old. The alpha female Kaya, who regarded Owen with ancient knowing eyes that suggested she'd seen his great-great-grandfather as a young man. The journals confirmed it. Kaya had been alpha when Owen's uncle first arrived 40 years ago. She was the living archive of the Covenant, the wolf who decided whether human candidates were worthy of guardianship. One evening, Kaya led Owen to a section of cave wall covered in what he initially thought was natural mineral staining. But as he studied it under firelight, patterns emerged. Handprints and pawprints preserved in some kind of ancient pigment or mineral deposit, arranged in pairs, human and wolf together, dating back centuries before Elias Barrett's time. The Covenant wasn't something Owen's ancestor had created. He'd simply formalized an agreement that had existed since indigenous peoples first settled these mountains. The spring, Owen realized, was conscious. Not in a way humans typically understood consciousness, but as a presence, an awareness embedded in the water itself. It was a node in a vast underground network connected to other sacred springs across the continent, part of an ecological nervous system that predated human civilization. The wolves had recognized this millennia ago and had appointed themselves its protectors. Humans were invited into that role only when they proved themselves worthy, and the Barretts had been worthy for 7 generations. Owen filled his water bottle from the spring, watching the liquid glow softly in the darkness. His lighthouse had guided ships through dangerous waters. This spring sustained something far more precious, the hidden wildness that survived despite humanity's relentless push toward control and exploitation. And Owen had just committed himself to protecting it for however long the water allowed him to live, which, if his uncle's 78 years of guardianship were any indication, might be considerably longer than he'd originally planned. He looked at Senna, at Kaya, at the glowing spring, and felt purpose settle into his bones like warmth after years of cold. Owen's peaceful immersion into guardianship ended on a frozen December morning when Senna woke him with urgent whining. The wolf's hackles were raised, her body language screaming alarm. Owen grabbed his coat and followed her into pre-dawn darkness, trusting her completely now. They ran through the forest, Senna setting a pace that would have exhausted the man who'd arrived 2 months ago, but which Owen's spring-enhanced body managed easily. They reached the property's southern boundary, where a survey team had erected equipment overnight. GPS markers, soil sampling rigs, and a temporary shelter. Owen's stomach dropped. He recognized the logo on the equipment, Helix Resource Development, a mining conglomeration known for aggressive land acquisition and even more aggressive exploitation. A surveyor emerged from the shelter, seeing Owen and Senna, and freezing. "Whoa! Hey, call off your dog, man!" "She's a wolf, and she won't hurt you unless you threaten this land," Owen said, his voice carrying authority he hadn't known he possessed. "You're trespassing. This is private property." The surveyor, a young man barely 30, held up his hands. "Look, our permits came through last week. County says this parcel defaulted on environmental compliance filings. They're seizing it under eminent domain. Helix purchased extraction rights. We're just doing preliminary surveys." Owen's mind raced. His uncle's final tax payment had included all required environmental documentation. Someone had deliberately lost those filings to manufacture a violation. He pulled out his phone to call the county assessor, then realized he had no signal. He'd been off the grid for weeks, disconnected from bureaucratic machinations. "Pack up and leave," Owen said. "Now." "Can't do that," the surveyor replied, nervousness mixing with corporate-trained stubbornness. "We have legal right to be here. And look, you seem like a reasonable guy. Helix is offering relocation compensation. Good money, more than you'd get fighting this." Senna's growl deepened, and 3 more wolves emerged from the tree line, Kaya and 2 large males forming a semicircle around the survey camp. The surveyor's companions stumbled out of the shelter, saw the wolves, and went pale. "This land isn't for sale, and it's not yours to survey," Owen said, his tone final. "Whatever Helix thinks it purchased, the claim won't stand. Leave willingly now, or these wolves will make you leave. They've protected this place for centuries. They're not impressed by permits." The surveyors backed toward their truck, loading equipment with trembling hands. "You're making a huge mistake," the lead surveyor called. "Helix doesn't take no for an answer. They'll bring lawyers, court orders, law enforcement. You can't win." "We'll see," Owen replied, watching them drive away, dust rising from the forest road. But he knew the surveyor was right about one thing. This was the beginning of a war, not a skirmish. Helix had resources Owen couldn't match, legal teams, political connections, perhaps even knowledge of what made this land valuable. Someone had informed them. Someone had identified the spring as worth whatever cost was necessary to acquire it. Owen spent the next 3 days hiking to the nearest town with cell service, filing emergency injunctions, contacting environmental lawyers, and researching Helix's operations. What he discovered chilled him. Helix specialized in extracting rare earth elements and had recently pivoted to biological resource acquisition, a euphemism for finding and patenting naturally occurring compounds with pharmaceutical potential. They'd somehow detected the spring's unique properties, probably through satellite imaging that detected the unusual plant growth surrounding the property. The legal battle would be expensive and drawn out. Owen had his uncle's modest inheritance and his own pension, but against a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that was pocket change. He needed allies, evidence, and a strategy that leveraged the one thing Helix couldn't easily combat: the truth about what this land meant, documented across 7 generations of guardianship. And he needed the wolves. Because if legal channels failed, Senna and Kaya had already demonstrated they'd defend the spring through any means necessary. Owen just hoped it wouldn't come to that. He returned to the cabin to find Senna waiting at the door, a leather satchel in her jaws, one of his uncle's possessions Owen hadn't yet discovered. Inside, contingency plans for exactly this scenario and a list of names, other guardians, other families protecting similar sites across North America. Owen wasn't alone after all. The network existed, and it was time to activate it. The names in his uncle's satchel led Owen to people he'd never imagined existed. A rancher in Montana, protecting a grove of trees that never lost their leaves. A fisherman in Maine, guarding a tidal pool where extinct species still thrived. A park ranger in Arizona, watching over a canyon where time moved differently than the surrounding desert. Each guardian protected a node in the network, a place where the Earth's ancient wildness persisted against modern encroachment. Owen made contact carefully, using coded phrases his uncle had documented, identifying himself through bloodline and covenant. The responses came quickly, and they all carried the same message. Helix Resource Development had begun targeting multiple sites simultaneously, using identical tactics: manufactured violations, eminent domain seizures, offers of relocation compensation that were really just bribes to abandon sacred ground. It was coordinated assault, suggesting Helix had mapped the entire network somehow. Owen learned that 3 months ago, a satellite imaging company Helix owned had launched advanced surveying technology capable of detecting subtle environmental anomalies. Unusual plant growth, water purity levels inconsistent with surrounding geology, even thermal signatures suggesting geological activity that shouldn't exist in stable regions. They'd found the nodes, all of them, and now they were moving to acquire the properties before Guardians could organize resistance. A conference call connected 7 Guardians across 3 time zones. They strategized through encrypted channels, sharing legal resources and coordinating media campaigns. The Montana rancher had connections to environmental organizations. The Maine fisherman knew investigative journalists hungry for corporate malfeasance stories. The Arizona ranger had documented decades of ecological data that could establish her canyon as a site of significant scientific interest, complicating Helix's acquisition. But the most valuable contribution came from a grandmother in British Columbia who'd been guarding a hot spring for 60 years. She'd faced similar corporate threats in the 1980s and had won by invoking indigenous treaty rights. Her family was Tsilhqot'in, and their ancestral claim to the land predated Canadian Confederation. She'd built alliances with tribal councils, turned her fight into a test case for indigenous sovereignty, and eventually forced the mining company to abandon their plans. "You need to make this about more than one man's property," she advised Owen. "You need to make it about heritage, about the right of wild places to remain wild, about the responsibility of protecting what can't be monetized. Tell your story. Let people see what Helix is really trying to take." Owen took her advice. He contacted journalists, offering interviews and access to his uncle's journals, carefully edited to remove references to the spring's more fantastic properties. He positioned himself as a simple lighthouse keeper, trying to honor his ancestor, his wish that this land remain undeveloped, a David versus Goliath narrative that resonated with public sentiment, increasingly skeptical of corporate overreach. Local newspapers ran stories. Regional TV stations sent crews to film the haunted cabin and interview the eccentric man living alone in the wilderness with a pack of wolves. Environmental blogs picked up the story, framing it as habitat protection for an endangered wolf population. The narrative gained momentum, and with it came scrutiny of Helix's methods. Journalists began investigating the suspicious timing of the environmental violations and discovered patterns suggesting systematic corruption in county land offices. Helix responded with their own PR campaign, positioning themselves as job creators being blocked by backward-thinking environmentalists. They produced economic impact studies, promised donations to local schools, held town halls where they showcased the benefits of responsible resource extraction. The battle wasn't just legal now, it was ideological. A culture war playing out in county commission meetings and social media threads. Owen found himself thrust into a role he'd never wanted: spokesperson, symbol, the human face of resistance against forces most people felt powerless to challenge. Senna stayed close during those weeks of interviews and meetings, her presence lending credibility to Owen's story. People who met the wolf, who looked into her ancient eyes and felt the intelligence there, came away believing something worth protecting existed at Greystone Ridge, even if they couldn't articulate exactly what. The court date approached. Owen had lawyers now, pro bono representation from environmental groups who saw his case as precedent-setting. But he also had nightmares about losing, about Helix drilling into the spring, draining it into tanks, analyzing and patenting, and destroying what had sustained his bloodline for 7 generations. He stood to lose more than a 25-cent cabin. He stood to lose purpose itself. The hearing took place in a county courthouse packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens in the hallway. Owen sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his legal team, while across the aisle, Helix's attorneys arranged documents with mechanical efficiency. Senna waited outside. Owen had wanted her in the courtroom, but animals weren't permitted, another rule privileging human judgment over natural wisdom. Helix presented their case first. Property in violation of environmental compliance, county authorized to seize and resell, all transactions legal and transparent. Their attorneys were polished, persuasive, armed with precedent. Owen's team countered with documentation proving the violations were fabricated, demonstrating that required filings had been submitted on time and lost through county office incompetence or corruption. Then Owen took the stand and told his story. Not the sanitized version for media, but the truth, within bounds of credibility. He spoke about his ancestors' covenant, about 7 generations of Barretts protecting land that sustained not just wolves, but the wild heart of the mountain itself. He presented the journals, the deeds, the letters documenting his family's commitment to stewardship over profit. He described what development would cost. This isn't just about my cabin or my inheritance. It's about whether we still believe some places should remain untouched, some wildness preserved, not for what it can give us, but for what it already is. Helix wants to extract resources. I want to protect something that can't be replaced once it's gone. The judge listened impassively. She'd heard passionate pleas before. What mattered was law, precedent, property rights. But then, something unprecedented happened. During a recess, a late filing arrived, a document from the Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Council asserting that Greystone Ridge fell within territory covered by an 1868 treaty recognizing indigenous claims to sacred waters and wolf denning grounds. The grandmother in British Columbia had made calls, and tribal legal experts had researched Owen's property, finding historical connections to indigenous land use. The filing changed everything. If tribal treaty claims held, then county seizure was invalid regardless of environmental violations. Helix's attorneys scrambled, requesting continuance to research the claim. But the judge, perhaps sensing an opportunity to avoid a controversial ruling, ordered mediation. All parties would negotiate a settlement that respected both property rights and treaty obligations. The mediation stretched across 3 tense days. Helix wanted access to the spring. Owen refused absolutely. They offered to lease just the water rights, promising minimal impact. Owen rejected that too. Finally, his legal team proposed a conservation easement. The land would be protected in perpetuity, with Owen maintaining lifetime guardianship and ownership, transferring upon his death to a trust managed jointly by the Barrett family and tribal representatives. Helix's attorneys caucused, calculating whether continued legal battle was worth the cost, especially as media attention intensified and their corporate reputation suffered from appearing to exploit indigenous treaty rights. They accepted the settlement with one condition: independent scientists would be allowed to study the spring's properties for academic purposes only, with any discoveries remaining in the public domain rather than subject to patent. Owen agreed. understanding that some exposure was inevitable and might actually protect the spring better than total secrecy. If scientists documented its ecological importance, future threats would face not just one guardian, but an entire research community invested in preservation. The judge approved the settlement. Owen walked out of the courthouse into November sunshine, Senna waiting at the bottom of the steps. The wolf's tail wagged slowly, approval in her amber eyes. That evening, Owen sat beside the spring with the entire pack surrounding him. Senna, Kaya, and 5 others. Some he'd grown to know, others still mysterious in their ancient reserve. He filled a cup from the glowing water and raised it in toast to Elias, who bought this land when it mattered most, to every Barrett who kept the covenant, and to you, my brothers and sisters in fur, who've protected this place far longer than my family has existed. We continue together. He drank, feeling the water's familiar warmth spread through his chest. Above ground, his 25-cent cabin waited for repairs. Below ground, the spring pulsed with eternal life. And Owen Barrett, former lighthouse keeper turned guardian of wilder lights, finally understood the value of things that can't be measured in currency. Some purchases are worth infinitely more than what they cost, and some secrets are worth a lifetime to protect.